Remember college? Ramen noodles for breakfast, keg stands at the frat house, and that one time you wore a toga to class? Sleep came easy and hangovers were the worst of our worries. We'll be digging through our college days when our knees didn't hurt and we could bend down to tie our own shoes without any help. Then we'll crash land back in reality, where you know your social calendar features more doctor's appointments than happy hours. This will be a hilarious, unflinching look at the journey from dorm room debauchery to derm filler diplomacy. We'll be chatting with friends whose stories are as legendary as they are relatable. We'll laugh, we'll cry, maybe even apply some face cream together. Getting older might come with many inconveniences, but it also comes with the wisdom, wit, and freedom to tell it like it is. This is Hot Flashbacks.
I know now.
And again, cute when you're 20, right?
Oh, yeah.
Totally acceptable to be, smoking and having 3 or 4 drinks a night.
I was so good at flaming Dr. Peppers, except for that time I almost burned my apartment down.
What is flaming? Is that where you put the shot in and then pour the Dr. Pepper on top or something?
It's like a scarier version of an Irish car bomb without the dairy.
So it's like vegan.
It's a health conscious. I've always been health conscious and also lactose intolerant. So
yeah. Welcome to Hot Flashbacks. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Molly Ward, and today I have my good friend JeNae, and we're going to chat a little bit today about anxiety and adult onset anxiety and how that sort of affects or how that comes out in your middle ages. JeNae, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is JeNae Miller. I have anxiety. No, I have known Molly for years now, and I'm excited to kind of capture some of our wit and banter on a microphone and kind of just add it to the archives of how funny we are.
We'll start our own This Is How Funny We Are podcast.
Yes.
Where we just say funny stuff and people listen in.
It's just hard because it's natural. It's just hard. It's just
true.
so difficult being this witty. I can't handle it.
Well, I appreciate you being here and being willing to talk and share. One of the reasons, really the main reason that I wanted to chat today was because I know that for a lot of adults, and in particular women, but for a lot of adults in your 30s and 40s, as your body is changing and you're aging, is the opposite of adolescence. Mm-hmm. Instead of getting hairs and getting excited, you're losing hairs and not being excited. So
big feelings.
Yes.
Big feelings and lots of anxiety to kind of, or I guess history to remind yourself how scary things can be. You have a lot more experience to compare life to, and it's like, I don't know, you have something else a little bit more terrifying to talk yourself out of every once in a while. But I think it's growing with those experiences and not letting them define you has probably been the biggest hurdle for me to overcome, because I mean, life's not been easy for anyone. And it's all a little bit more of taking those experiences with grace and learning how to, I guess, I don't know, make it make sense in your brain.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, but my brain has a lot of really fun and exciting conspiracy theories. I'm very mean to myself sometimes, but
my brain just does a lot of singing. Like I'll get a song in my head and I'll sing that song over and over and over to the point where I'm driving myself crazy. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if I'm not thinking of something else, then my brain is singing.
Oh, yeah.
It's this really disruptive.
Well, and getting those songs that become your like hyperfixation, aka a source of dopamine. And it's like, I'm going to squeeze every bit of emotion out of this song till I feel nothing.
The first time I remember hyperfixating, I know we're digressing, but I promise we'll get back. I was probably 10 or 11. And do you remember that song about being a short baller? I forget the name.
I wish I was a baller.
Sang the song, yeah.
A little bit taller if I had it.
Okay. So I remember that I had a Discman and I was sitting in the backseat of the car.
For those playing at home, what's a Discman? Yeah. Just kidding. Yeah.
So you put the CD in and I was in the backseat of the car and I needed to know all the words of the song. Mm-hmm. So I would play it and write the lyrics and rewind it and play it and write the lyrics and rewind it. And I probably spent an hour really trying to get all of the words to that song that Too Short sang. Mm-hmm. I still know all the words, by the way.
100%. It's humble brag for Yeah, and back in the day when you would buy CDs and then they would come with the little leaflets so you could memorize the lyrics.
Look at the lyrics.
Oh,
it was a whole experience. As one that's missing from this generation.
They'll never understand. Never. And I pity them.
Yeah.
I pity them.
Albums are a thing of the past, it seems like, at least in the artistic sense of like having the whole album. Anyway.
Well, now you have AI that is like creating album artwork for people, which is a whole different podcast and a very long tangent that I don't know if we're good.
I don't think we're qualified to do an AI podcast. I know nothing.
Oh, no. I know just enough to know that it may threaten my job one day very soon.
So I think in talking about, and I know we touched a little bit now on ADHD and on anxiety, and I myself have a late in life ADHD and anxiety, what's the word? Diagnosis. Yeah. I was going to say evaluation, but that's not right. Yeah. I have a late in life diagnosis of ADHD and anxiety. And when I was speaking with my doctor about it, he mentioned that often, especially for women, anxiety comes later in life. It can happen at any age, but there are a lot of women who don't experience anxiety their whole lives and then hit their 30s and 40s. And we see a rise in anxiety in women. And I thought it would be helpful for people to just have a base understanding of where you come from and what you're about. And then let's talk a little bit about exploring what you've done to cope with your anxiety and how it presents itself. So tell us a little bit about your growing up and maybe some of the things that might have impacted where you're at now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I come from, unfortunately, a lot of traumatic experiences and I mean, I don't want to get too, I guess, morbid or graphic for fear of possibly triggering someone that didn't come to this channel to listen to that kind of information. But from childhood, I wasn't very protected, and that became my norm, of just being very self-reliant. You kind of have to. And I was kind of conditioned from early on to accept the fact that no matter how bad things get for you, just remember that it can, someone else always has it worse. And that created a lot of really unhealthy coping mechanisms for me that didn't do me any favors when I continued to experience just life in general, but just additional traumas from being diagnosed with cancer at the age of 15, to kind of denouncing Mormonism at 18. And
that's like a whole podcast.
Oh yeah. Religious trauma. We could untangle that, which is only something now that I'm realizing I experienced. I was actually just talking about this with one of my close friends, Trishelle, who is always my voice of reason in my echo chamber. And, we come from different backgrounds, but have had a lot of similar experiences. And she's the one that also really helps me realize that, in addition to my therapist, that a lot of the stuff that I did experience was not normal and not okay. And,
that validation's important.
100%. And illuminating too, because to me, it was the normal. I did have cancer, but there were a lot of kids that did at the time as well that weren't able to get into recovery and become, an adult. And that was my standard, that was hard, but it could have been harder. And so I did a lot of dismissing my experiences early on, which I think led to the tornado that was my 20s, of a lot of unhealthy, what I now in hindsight realize were coping mechanisms, I've always had anxiety. I definitely have from a kid. I just didn't realize that's what it was because it wasn't a part of a conversation that my family or even my peers at the time were having. And it wasn't until I probably right before I turned 30 realized I needed to go through each one of these boxes that I had kind of compartmentalized, and it started to explain more about myself and my behavior in my 20s, and that it defines your whole path. I mean, the relationships that you seek out too are part of, that's why I entered into a really toxic marriage that I'm happy to say last year I was brave enough to leave. But it's not until I started accepting the fact that what I went through, it did define a lot of my personality traits, but it doesn't take away from me being able to get better and to, I don't know, to live more authentically now in this day and age, which is, I'm thankful now that our generation is
more open and ready to talk.
And I think that helps with a lot of people realizing that we do have anxiety. We're not just people pleasers because we're control freaks. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, it's because it's our way of taking control of what we feel is an uncontrollable situation. And so I mean, even from work to roller derby to everywhere, I was a standout perfectionist. And it was because I wanted to be what everyone else had kind of defined around me was successful. Cause I don't know if I've ever really, I don't know if I've ever really felt successful.
What that looks like or feels like.
Yeah. I was constantly striving. And it's an impossible task to be perfect. And
I know it.
Oh, right. And it's like, once you start going into those people pleasing behaviors is when you start compromising your boundaries, which then leads you're like, why am I still so anxious? It's like, well, because you weren't happy in the beginning and now you wonder why you're in this. It's a triggering environment, but you were just trying to mold the outcome, which is impossible, you know?
Yeah. I think one of the things you mentioned earlier about having anxiety and remembering what it's like to have anxiety at a younger age, but not being able to identify what that is. Mm-hmm. And as you get older, I think some of the things that come along with anxiety or even ADHD, because these things do exist on a spectrum of sorts, right? Mm-hmm. Is that some of the things that you do and some of the qualities that come along with something like ADHD or anxiety can be socially acceptable at a young age and mm-hmm. maybe even beneficial. And so when I was young, I remember being called hyperactive mm-hmm. and I remember being hyperactive and I think I honed my ADHD to the point where it worked for me because I have some great qualities that come along with that. Right?
Superpowers almost.
Superpowers, mm-hmm, right. Mm-hmm. My ability to hyperfixate and get things done, my ability to, I don't want to say multitask, but I can really go from one thing to the next pretty quickly, which can also be a negative, right?
Yeah.
And so, but those things become less acceptable as you get older. And I think the hyperactivity is like cute when you're 16, mm-hmm. But when you're a 38-year-old hyperactive, not as cute anymore.
Right.
And I think that's when I realized, wow, I need to get some of these things under control for myself mm-hmm. because these are things I got away with when I was younger, talking a lot, mm-hmm. Getting distracted easily, but being entertaining, all those things really worked for me in a lot of ways. And as you get older, some of those things don't work anymore. You know?
Right.
Nobody wants a chatty, interrupts everybody, always says something funny and is never on topic 42-year-old in the office.
Right. Right. And I mean, I relate to that so heavily, especially understanding more about my neurodivergence and, being on the spectrum has it's conflicting. It's because I feel validated in a lot of my behavior now because it explains so much about the way I work and the way I operate and, understanding why am I obsessed with blueberries for this month? Like, why can I only eat blueberry flavored everything? I don't, and it was validating in the beginning, but then you also have that little bit of a mourning period for your younger self of like, you kind of feel bad for that young person from teens to 20s that was navigating this life without a guidebook. And for me, I've yet to figure out if my neurodivergence is a big part of my anxiety, or is it my experiences, or is it a fun and exciting combination of both, which I think that may be the answer.
That answer sounds way more fun.
Yeah, maybe kind of cool.
Harder to cope with and medicate, but still more fun.
Yeah. And I mean, I know now, hindsight, that I was feeling a lot of these symptoms of neurodivergence and anxiety. And the way I chose to cope with them was drugs and alcohol all through my 20s. Yeah. And I know now.
You're cute when you're 20, right?
Oh, yeah.
Totally acceptable to be, smoking and having 3 or 4 drinks a night.
I was so good at flaming Dr. Peppers, except for that time I almost burned my apartment down.
Is that where you put the shot in and then pour the Dr. Pepper on top or something?
It's like Jaeger and
makes it taste like Dr. Pepper?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's like Jaeger, and then there's a fun little combination. You light the liquor on fire, you drop it into the other. Right. So it's like a scarier version of an Irish car bomb without the dairy.
So it's like vegan.
Yeah, it's a health conscious. I've always been health conscious and also lactose intolerant. So
yeah, I just think that, again, those are things that, if you're using them as coping strategies and you're not aware of that in your 20s, mid 20s, even late 20s, depending on where you live. And as I think in some places, the less is expected of 25-year-olds than maybe other places, right? So in Utah, a lot of folks get married young and have kids young. And so I think the expectations of a 25-year-old in Utah probably look very different than a 25-year-old in, Boston or New York City, right? But those things that you're doing and those coping mechanisms that you have are more socially acceptable. And it's part of what's expected, that you're going to sort of have these experiments or do these things, have these experiences, be crazy. Not as socially acceptable to be, in your mid 40s doing flaming Dr. Peppers in your kitchen every night, right?
And burning your place down, right? It's like, oh, what? She's a mess. And it's like, no, that's just, I think about it often too, is like living in Utah is dystopian universe where those of us that did drink or do go out and things like, we're the others. We're not the norm either, but still we're so harshly judged that it's like, I'm going to be bad more, Your
perfectionism kicked in. I'm going to be the best
I'm going to be the best alcoholic.
The perfectionism thing is interesting, is that is generally associated with anxiety. And, I didn't realize how much of a perfectionist I had become until I got married and really started parenting as a step parent. And what I learned was a lot of my anxiety really started to kick in and show itself at that time in my life, because I think I'm also a people pleaser, as we talked about. And what I found about myself is I really want everyone to be happy and have fun. Now, these seem like really great qualities, right? So,
it's redeeming in a way.
Molly, plan a party. Absolutely. Right.
I'm going to be the best.
I'll make sure that everybody has a good time. And wanting everyone to have a good time can also be a really overwhelming place to be, because you're not really in control of other people's emotions.
Right.
And I understand that I can plan the best party in the world, but if you have a shit day and come to my party, you might not be having a lot of fun.
For sure.
And I would take that personal. And I would do everything I could to try to fix that. And then I would be disappointed in myself that you didn't look like you're having fun. And when you have kids, you realize, especially as they get older and become teenagers, that they're never having fun. Right. And so it's really difficult. We went to Universal Studios a couple of weeks ago for spring break and took the kids. And I just remember saying to myself, not to allow the way that they look, or the look on their face, or their posture, or how slow they walk, or how little they talk to me to dictate how much fun I have today.
Oh, that's hard.
It is hard, because I get so much joy out of watching them have fun. And there's nothing wrong with that, except the cycle can go too far, because then when they're not having fun, it ruins my joy.
Right.
And that's when I really started to realize my perfectionism was kicking in, that everything had to be perfect, that the dinner had to have all the appropriate food groups, and they had to have the perfect outfit that they wanted, and I had to make every weekend fun, and we had to do all the things. And my lovely wife at some point was like, I think you're overwhelmed. You're overwhelming yourself and you're overwhelming us because you want everything to be a certain way. And it's just not going to be like that. And my anxiety kept telling me that I would feel better if everything was just perfect.
And you kept like moving the goalpost a little bit. Yeah. And it's hard when I struggle with the same thing. And I've actually had a recent experience of that with a friend I went to a show with, and it was an artist that I have been obsessed with since high school. So I was buzzing, and it was Greaves and Chris Webby. It's like hip hop. It's okay.
I got nothing. Chris Webby, I think I've heard of.
Yeah. So I'd been looking forward to it. We had planned this show for a while, and then we get there, and I am fully sober now, and I have had a lot of practice in learning how to have fun sober, but this particular person hasn't. And she's really big on supporting me through my journey and didn't want to, but I didn't realize at the time this was her first concert she had ever been to sober as a judge. And halfway through that concert, while I am living my best life, I'm bouncing around, I'm jiggling all my parts. And I look over and she looks like she's having the worst time of her life. And I didn't know how to navigate it. I kept asking, are you having fun? Do you want to go? Do you want to stand somewhere else? And I'm disappointed now in realizing that I let the fact that she was going through her own stuff that had nothing to do with me, and I know that she likes those artists. Like we had talked about it. We listened to that music all the way down to Salt Lake. But because she wasn't matching my energy or my enthusiasm, what the expectation I had in my head, she assured me multiple times that she was having a great time. No, this is fun. It was
this is me having fun.
Yeah, this is me having sober fun, JeNae. Not everybody is a lunatic like you at these concerts, you know? And so I think that's indicative that I still have a lot of work to do on letting people enjoy things, have their experiences the way that they want to have them without me trying to impress my expectations of what their fun should look like. I have no idea how to do that yet.
Yeah.
And it's all part of that fun journey we talk about of just having to experience stuff and gain those lessons. I think the only time you do it wrong is when you don't learn, right?
You don't do anything at all.
Or don't do anything at all.
Well, I was talking about this the other day. Therapy is hard. I know you've been to a lot of therapy. I myself have been to a decent amount of therapy. And the thing is that therapy is work. And the saying that you keep doing the same things over and over and expecting different results is how a lot of people operate, is like, I'm not happy with my life, or I'm unhappy with this, or I have anxiety and I'm anxious and I'm upset and I'm overwhelmed often, but I'm just going to keep doing the things that I always do.
Yeah.
Right. So that's not going to help you. Right. We recognize that in order for things to be different, we have to do things differently. And I think that's really difficult. And especially when you wait until your mid-30s to address some of your mental health issues, because, I have a lifetime of doing things a certain way, and undoing that and recognizing the ways that I contribute and how I can help myself is a task. Oh yeah. It's a task.
I have a question. When you first started going to therapy, how full send did you go? I'm curious, did you start with the journals? I'm going to journal every day. I'm going to meditate so fucking hard. I'm curious just because our personalities are so similar. I want to know, when you started, was it I'm going to control everything that they said? Cause I'm projecting probably. That's what I did and still do. It works for me. I'm not hurting anybody else, but once I started getting these tools, I was again finding myself that I'm going to be the best at therapy. And that's not a unit of measure. No one's the best at being shrinked.
You win.
Yeah, I got the prize. What was yours like? Was it
so? No, I don't recall being full send into trying out the things that I learned, or, it is going all vegan or journaling 24/7, or, ditching all caffeine, nicotine, and alcohol. Or I didn't do anything like that. What is interesting is that for me, I'm really interested in the learning side of things. And so what I do is talk a lot about it. And I get really into understanding what my therapist is saying and how it applies to me, and then for myself, filtering what it means and what I need to do differently. And then the annoying part is that I like to tell other people about that.
I don't think it's annoying because I'm like, tell me your secret.
I'm like, coworker, I see what you're doing there. See, what this actually is you're projecting. You know?
Yeah.
And I'm going to therapize everybody.
Oh God, I am an offender. I do that too. And I do believe in chronic, toxic positivity.
Me too. I've had that person in my life.
Where it's like, no, this is shitty. I'm allowed to say it's shitty. Let me just be shitty. I'm not going to live here. I'm not going to move into this space,
Shitsville.
Circling back to the beginning where you start dismissing the hard feelings. Yes. I have to be very careful with the positive people I surround myself with. Not that it's bad. I'm just talking about the state that we live in. There's a lot of the shiny, happy people that don't want to talk about the hard stuff and pretending it doesn't exist doesn't make it not exist, and I'm okay to be in a bad mood. Let me just feel these feelings really quick. Don't try to therapize me out of it, There's one motto that I have and remind myself of often that applies to so many scenarios. And now that I've announced that I have a motto, I'm going to botch it. But it is basically, wait for it, dramatic pause. It is basically this idea that too much of anything is a bad thing. Yeah. And there is so much to be learned from recognizing that going full send into everything or anything also has its drawbacks. And that too much of even a good thing isn't a good thing, right? I mean, you can eat broccoli. Broccoli is great for you. It's cruciferous and it's healthy and it's low calorie. But if you eat broccoli all of the time, you will end up with some digestive issues. You will shit your pants. And no friends because you stink. But it's true, right? And so this applies to so many scenarios, and I remind myself that there is such a thing as too much of a good thing, that I need to be able to dial back in certain scenarios, that there is we're always trying to strike the happy medium. And it's almost impossible, but it is where you want to be in a lot of situations. Yeah. You want to be healthy, you want to eat right, but you want to have fun and you want to go out. And so how do you merge those things together and come up with a place where you feel like you're getting just enough of what you need without overdoing any one aspect? Is that this kind of thing my anxiety is talking about? I was going to say, I was like, ooh, girl. We need to go back to therapy, Molly. We's anxious this morning. We's anxious. I am, but I told you I medicated before I came here because I was like, but I think moderation is something that I'm still learning about.
That's such a good word. Why didn't I just say moderation?
That's why I'm here. What I meant. Yeah. That's what we're riffing together. Yeah, it's hard. And I mean, every day is different. I mean, we're going to go with the broccoli analogy. Some days you're going to need a lot more broccoli because you're backed up, whatever. Yeah. But then there's some days that you don't need broccoli, and it's the emotional intelligence or awareness to know today's my broccoli day. I'm going to have it every meal, or, the inverse of that of like, I'm off broccoli this week, and so
is cauliflower the inverse of broccoli? I think it is.
It is now. Yeah. But opposite. Yeah. I think that comes with more therapy and figuring out how much broccoli do you need, because the amount of broccoli that I need today is going to be different from your broccoli, and having that community too that pulls you out of the echo chamber of I'm obsessed with broccoli is really important.
Yeah, what's really important for me right now is to mention that I never intended to talk about vegetables that much on this podcast.
Listen, one thing about me, if I hear an analogy, I'm running. Okay, and I'm going to talk about broccoli probably in about 10 minutes. I'll figure out a way to tie this conversation back to fruits and veggies. But yeah, I think I enjoy being in therapy I didn't start... Okay, my therapy journey has been complicated, but I think it was because probably around 23 is when I had been living on my own since I was 17, moved from Las Vegas to Utah. And I mean, there's a difference between growing up and maturing for sure. I think that I had to grow up at a very early age, but I didn't start actually maturing until I was about 23. And then I started going to therapy. And first time I tried, I wasn't in a place where I was I just wasn't ready. I have complex PTSD, which basically means that I've had multiple traumatic experiences. And once I started to get in the weeds and realizing how much work I had to do and how much processing I had locked away, I realized very quickly I wasn't ready. So what did I do? Flaming Dr. Peppers for like another 2 years.
The answer to everything.
Yeah.
At that time.
So after a couple more years of Flaming Dr. Peppers, I decided to go back to therapy and I tried EMDR. And EMDR was scary, but very, very helpful in taking a lot of these experiences off the shelf one at a time.
Thank you so much for being here, JeNae. This was a really great conversation. I look forward to wrapping this up with you next week on our part 2 episode of Anxiety in Middle-Aged Women. This is Hot Flashbacks. We're out. Thanks for listening to Hot Flashbacks. If you enjoyed it, be sure to follow us on social media and like this episode. Want more content? Smash that follow button wherever you get your podcasts and never miss an episode. Thanks for sharing your ears, friends. I'll catch you on the flip side.